It's a pleasure to talk to you today about meaning, space, and shape. It's not this sort of space. It's physical space, institutional space, and conversational space. And to do so, I shall use some geometrical figures because they are something which we all understand in our liquid global world. This Japanese temple, you can see a circular window and a rectangular room. The circular window helps you to look out at nature, and there's a feeling of horizontal peace and space. People are happy in this space. They're not looking up to anything. Whereas if you go to the Duomo, the cathedral in Venice, again you see a rectangle and a circular dome, but the impression is completely different. And for a Japanese person, this seems so busy with so many figures on the walls. And you feel that there is a relationship to a hierarchy. The faithful are going to worship and look at their master that's at the table at the end of the room. The same differences you can find outside. In this square, which is not square, it's round, you can see how the faithful are going to the Vatican. Think of the difference between that and the impression you get in Siena. Here, the square belongs to the people. It's where the Palio takes place. You can also find this difference outside in gardens. The Boboli garden is a beautiful artistic garden which you go to admire here in Florence. Whereas Hyde Park in London is a space which people use and enjoy. They play football, they eat, they lie, they make love. It's a completely different space. But there are other spaces that are much more hidden and can also be very influential. One of these spaces is that of the legal system. Most of us don't think about it very much, but there's an enormous difference between an Italian legal system and the Anglo-Saxon one. The Italian one is based on unilateral power. Public power is top-down and it's one way. The Anglo-Saxon one, the English, the Australian, the American, the New Zealand, are plural. The state is based on plural institutions. And there are different premises behind the way things are conducted. The Italian public administration is based on impartiality and impersonality, whereas the Anglo-Saxon one seeks to be a guarantor of equity and of mediation between different interests, as it's plural. There are consequences for this. Agreements in Italy are excluded from the public administration. You don't talk to the public administration. Whereas in the Anglo-Saxon system, again, the actors are plural because they believe that people together can make better decisions. The more social actors you have to discuss certain things, the better the decision will be. One clear consequence of this is the shape of the tables. When you have a round table meeting in Italy, it's usually a rectangular table. Nobody talks to anybody else. Each person presents his position, and nobody talks to the person next to them. Whereas the Anglo-Saxon ones do a lot of round tables. And the consequence of this is that they actually try to explore new solutions. This can change the way citizens feel in relationship to the state. In Italy, people talk about rights and duties, diritti e doveri, which can be translated in English as rights and duties, but it seems strange to us because we are much more used to the concept of rights and responsibilities, because we feel that we are part of that state rather than the state imposing itself upon us. Now, there are other sorts of space that can be hidden, and one of these is conversational space. And in a public context like a bookshop, you would be surprised to find that there are enormous differences in the way Italians and English people buy books. The Italian, this is from a database of 400 interactions in Bologna and in London. The Italian customer usually goes into the shop and says what he needs. I'm looking for War and Peace. And the shop assistant sends him to the section or goes and gets the book. If the book is not there, though, the assistant says, it's not in. And the customer has to insist, if he wants to go, not in? When will it arrive? Oh, perhaps next week. When? So gradually the customer has to insist until he gets the information. The English, London English, British English, organisation of the interaction is quite different. First of all, the customer usually goes and looks for the book on his own. So he only comes back to talk to the shop assistant if the book is not there. And when he comes and says it, he doesn't say, I'm looking for, but he says, do you have? He starts with the perspective of the shop assistant. Do you have War and Peace? Perhaps it's in comparative literature, or perhaps. So tries to give an alternative because he does not want to embarrass the shop assistant. Now, an Italian thinks that is absolutely crazy. They say it's a shop assistant's job to sell you the book. It's not. But the customer is embarrassed, the English customer is embarrassed if the book is not there, and the person is going to be upset. And equally, the shop assistant is embarrassed to give negative information. And signals this by, well, I'm afraid it's not in. Should be in next week. Completely different way. And in the same turn, the shop assistant has given a solution. Whereas the Italian one, the customer had to insist to get that solution. Now, these can be summed up in two sorts of interactional circle. The Italian enters the space of the other. In fact, often the Italian overlaps in the conversation. Whereas the English one is there are two separate spaces. This is my space, that is your space. I'll knock on the door rather timidly if I have to come in and ask you something. This may be very different in the States, but I look at some of us here, even in this international context, and see that Italians do tend to take space more, and we English tend to sort of slide in. Learnt this on my own skin when I was transcribing Neapolitan data. So that's not Bologna, that's Naples, further south. And I transcribed all this data. I came out after about 6 hours of transcribing, went into the kitchen, and a friend who was staying with me, who owed me a lot, was there. And I said, oh, Stephen, you must take some papers to the university for me. What? I must take some papers to the university? What do you mean, must? And I said, oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. Do you think you could possibly take some papers to the university for me? Oh, yes, of course. No problem. So these are just little examples of how we use space differently, we perceive space differently, and we manage space differently. Now, to conclude, I'd like you, if you want, to play a game. You can do it at home. You use any of these symbols, the circle, square, triangle, and you use them 12 times in all. So it can be 10 circles, 2 triangles, or 6 triangles, 3 circles, and 3 squares. You have to use the symbols 12 times in all to draw a person. And if you do that and scan it and send it to me, I will try and interpret it for you. But to conclude, we should have a tape which shows you my preference for shape. Have we got the tape? No? No tape. Sorry. We're not doing very well with the technology. I'm not doing very well with the technology this time. Anyway, thank you very much.